Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington, D.C.
Thanks. I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
The 20th Africa Growth and Opportunity Act Forum was recently held in Johannesburg, South Africa, with calls for its eligibility, renewal, and authorization across board. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, as is popularly called, is a United States of America trade program that provides eligible countries in sub-Saharan Africa with preferential access to the U.S. markets. And this year's theme, as always, seeks to promote trade and economic cooperation between the United States and nations of the African continent. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Semosa, brings us that story from Johannesburg.
South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Ibrahim Patel, is playing host to a distinguished delegation of African trade ministers.
And so as our US friends look to the African continent, we want them to see this as a major place of procurement, not just from one country, but across the continent.
During the opening ceremony, the Commissioner for Trade and Industry of the African Union Commission, Mr. Albert Mochanga, stressed the importance of African nations maximizing the benefits offered by AGOA for structural transformation.
One of the key issues will be for you to consider the recommendations from the senior officials. So I'll be back when you go into that document.
Head of Trade for Business and Commercial Banking, Standard Bank Group, Philip Mayberg, says Africa should seize every trade opportunity.
I think it's always good for African economies to look at all options in terms of trade opportunities, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of another one. The opportunity that we have as an African continent is we've got the opportunity to look at trade opportunities both towards the east, towards the west, and also importantly within the continent. I think AGOA forms an important part of that landscape.
Made in Africa Business Expo forms part of 2023 AGOA Forum. It is here where I caught up with some Nigerian entrepreneurs.
Okay, well, all the way from Oka, Anambra State, Nigeria, I wish and I pray, and I know it's achievable, to get a bit of tax-free, to get our products on all the shelves, well marked, all the shops in America, even in South Africa, like ShopRite and all that. So that's what I'm praying to achieve.
In this program, I hope to have connections and have possibly more customers that may need my products that I can send to them. In fact, I want to send to America, not only America, all over the world.
Exhibitors have gathered here with a common goal to access the U.S. market, subsequently create long-lasting partnerships. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Semosa, Channels Television News.
And joining us to discuss this is an African Affairs Analyst and Program Manager, Center for Human Rights, Faculty of Law, University of Pretoria, Janet Bam. Glad to have you on Africa 54 today.
Thank you.
So this year's AGOA Forum has come and gone, but there are some fallouts. A group of U.S. lawmakers are pushing for reauthorization to change the annual review of assessment of each country's eligibility status at least once every 3 years, and also a proposal to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act by 16 years. What do you make of all of this?
I think anyone who is thinking of a better future for their countries will really include Africa in whatever initiatives that they are working on now. A recent UN report estimates that 1 in 4 people by 2050 will be from Africa or of African descent. So it just makes the point clear that the future of the world is dependent on the creativity that comes from Africa. And countries like America, who have great foresight, are already seeing that this agreement, which they have for over 2 decades, would expire by 2025. And so they are now calling for a need, which, if you ask me, it's actually a very smart move on their part, because in the next 16 years, there is so much that Africa has to offer, and in particular, Nigeria. We are already seeing indicators of the creativity that comes out of Nigeria and other African countries. And I believe any country that wants a better future for itself and for reimagining the kind of future that it has, will want to include Africa and the creativity that comes out of this country, both in economics, music, arts, and in whatever sectors actively into its sphere. So that's actually a very brave and bold move by them to think of a plan ahead in such a manner. But I also think on the aspect of the eligibility, there are, when I look at the AGOA eligibility criteria, my concern is always on the human rights parameter. And now, of the 35 countries that are currently members of eligible for the agreements, there are so many countries, of course. Our dear Nigeria is on the list, so I would not really go past the eligibility, because I think putting it at 3 years, why may also be good. A lot can change in just a year. So I'm not sure how that will go. So if there are violations within a 3-year frame, when do we really reimagine it? Do we wait until the 3 years expires, or are they putting mechanisms in place to ensure that maybe within the 3-year period, there are like instances where people can actually work it out? But yeah, I don't know. I think for now we'll just wait and see how all of it pans out and whether it is being agreed and it will be adopted.
Right, and we understand 4 beneficiary countries, Uganda, Niger Republic, Gabon, and the Central African Republic, were kicked out of the trade program on the eve of the forum's annual summit in Johannesburg. I could understand that a country like Niger, because of the military takeover. But what do you think of these expulsions? Some would say that the implication is gross violation of international human rights law.
One of the reasons that were given for these expulsions and suspensions was mostly the human rights component to these countries. And we see that Niger, Burkina Faso was already expelled a while back, are all countries that have been in the news recently for the military coups that took place. So I think for a trade agreement that is specifically based on one of its core components being human rights, it will be hypocritical not to expel such countries that are the fore of total disregard for human rights. And when you speak to the case of Uganda, we all know the stance of Uganda, especially in relation to sexual minorities, which are rights that are very at the core of the US agenda in so many countries in the world. So when you take a look at all the countries and the very open nature of their total disregard for some specific human rights, and in this instance, human rights that are the core of our being and expression as human beings, then it is just fair that such countries are excluded from, such initiatives that they had been a member of by their agreements that they would also uphold human rights.
So how beneficial, in your opinion, do you think the AGOA initiative has been to a country like Nigeria?
For Nigeria, I think the Nigerian market, for anyone who really wants proper development, for every country that you go to, there is always a place for Nigerian, goods, especially food. And I remember when I was traveling some time ago to Ireland, and I asked a friend, what do you want me to bring for you? And she was like, no, it's fine. I already have everything I need here and I could buy. And it just goes to show that the diversity and the reach of Nigerian goods all over the world. I think I also always say that it's easier to send things, to the West, that's to Europe, America, than it is to even trade in Africa. And then which brings me to the next point about the importance of leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area, which aims to promote trade within the continent and free movement. But also, I think as a continent, we must be open to embrace what the AfTA has to offer for benefits and growth of business in Africa.
You did say that for development purposes, other continents should always see Africa as part of their plans, especially when it comes to trade and development. So in the future, who do you think may stand to benefit more from this? Is it the African continent or is it the West?
I think it could be a mutual beneficial relationship depending on how well we also maximize the agreement. The AGOA agreement is simple. It's a give and take agreement. The U.S. gives free trade tariffs to goods from Africa and also expects the same relationship from African countries who they have interactions with. But historically, we have seen that the West always benefits more from its interactions with Africa. And I believe that when we use such platforms, we can, as a matter of fact, reimagine for ourselves what we really want to see in this agreement that will be beneficial for us as a country, for Nigeria as a country, and even Africa, the greater Africa as a continent.
Right. African Affairs Analyst Janet Bam, thank you so much for your time on the program today.
No, it is my absolute pleasure. And maybe just with parting words to say that in all that we do, especially in promoting development, we must understand that real sustainable development can only be achieved when it is rooted in human rights principles. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, China's Belt and Road Initiative brings Africa roads, rails, energy and debt. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. Some 150 countries, many of them in Africa, have signed on to China's 10-year-old Belt and Road Initiative, also known as the BRI. And while the multi-billion-dollar global infrastructure project helped bring roads, rails, infrastructure, it also left some countries saddled with debt. VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief Mariama Diallo takes a look at the impact the BRI has had on Africa and the benefits and critiques of the Chinese initiative.
The standard gauge railway, which debuted in Kenya 6 years ago, was hailed by Kenyan officials as one of the biggest and most successful projects since the nation's independence in the 1960s. Travel time from Mombasa to Nairobi used to be up to 10 hours. Now, it only takes about 5 to 6 hours.
You are a businessman, you're going for an interview, it saves your time.
Kenya borrowed some $5 billion from China to build railway lines connecting the port city of Mombasa to Nairobi and Nairobi to Naivasha. This is part of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. It's a global infrastructure, trade, and telecommunications project that includes the goal of connecting Kenya to Uganda, Rwanda, and South Sudan.
The good side, one is that it's a framework for transportation of goods, transportation of cargo.
But economist Vincent Kimosop wishes some things were done differently for the railway, also called SGR.
I wish those who were responsible for negotiating the SGR would have actually looked at the repayment. It's a massive investment project. To have repayments be done in less than 20 or 30 years, that was quite ambitious.
During its construction, critics of the project protested its potential impact on wildlife. A part of this railway cuts through the Nairobi National Park. Over the last decade, some 150 countries have joined the initiative, including most African countries.
Africa's population is growing significantly, and there's a need on the continent for more infrastructure. From the Chinese perspective, Africa is desirable because it wants to secure inputs for its manufacturing sector. And when it looks around the world, a lot of these, whether it's copper, cobalt, or other minerals, are found in Africa.
Countries such as Kenya, Ethiopia, and Zambia have seen massive Chinese-built infrastructure. But some countries have also been struggling with debt, including Zambia, a major Chinese borrower, which was the first country to default on its debt during the pandemic. The West has been critical of China for lending to poor countries and says it must quickly provide relief to those that ended up with unpayable debts.
prompt action on debt is in China's interest.
Sachs notes a lot of countries joined BRI at a time when economic growth was quite robust, but that shifted.
The first shock, of course, was the COVID-19 pandemic, which really eviscerated global economic growth, but also hit the developing world particularly hard. And then the second one, I think, of course, was the war in Ukraine. Africa, major importers of food, as well as oil, prices for those commodities have gone up tremendously.
Back at the train station, many of these travelers mostly enjoyed their ride.
It is a safe mode of transport that we as Kenyans, we embrace it.
A recent Boston University study finds that lending to Africa by China has dropped to the lowest level in 2 decades. Analysts, however, say while the BRI is here to stay, Beijing may be moving towards smaller investments. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Nairobi.
Federal College of Agriculture, Moore Plantation, Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, was host to farmers at a forum targeted at enhancing the potentials of rural farming through agricultural support programs. The production of gari, a major staple food in many homes in Nigeria, was the focus. The organizers said that the production of gari in the cassava value chain must be taken more seriously to aid the country's bid for food security. The forum also raised concerns about a decline in the number of smallholder farmers who are into cassava cultivation and calls on government at all levels to support them with funding and other incentives.
It's the maiden edition of the World Gari Day, and attendees are predominantly farmers. To be more specific, they are cassava farmers, the root crop from which gari, as it is known, is locally made. Farming, they say, is no more difficult than any other occupation, but the lack of funding makes it tough to cultivate even cassava. The aim of this gathering is to encourage them to keep at it, as they represent a critical population in keeping Nigeria's food insecurity intact.
Gari is made from cassava tubers, which are ground into a flour-like consistency. Gari is an important source of carbohydrates, protein, vitamins, and minerals. It plays a key role in the human diet and has many health benefits. It is a good source of antioxidants and fiber.
In the cassava value chain, gari is a staple, and according to the farmers, its production should be encouraged for many reasons, including nutritional and economic development concerns.
This issue and the vision of Mr. President is very important, and that is why this college, Federal College of Agriculture, is working in tandem with the vision of Mr. President and the vision of our parent ministry, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, able to ensure food job creation, wealth creation, and food security.
Experts at this event suggest that cassava farming could be the solution to the country's lingering food insecurity, as they urge the federal government and relevant policy makers to embrace cassava farming.
Gari production in Nigeria plays diverse roles in helping to tackle various challenges, such as food security, empowering farmers, job creation, value addition, entrepreneurship opportunity, export potential.
Some of the facilitators asked that the synergy between research institutes and farmers be improved so outcomes can be implemented on time.
Every of these scientific discovery, researches, whatever we have, should be communicated to the farmers early enough so that they can apply it, and once they apply it, it will be to the benefit of all of us.
The forum urged government at all levels to intervene, particularly in the areas of funding for investment, technological advancement, and constant advocacy to farmers to help boost their productivity.
It's time now for a short break. As we do, remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. And still to come, Nigeria's pidgin language movie, Mami Wata, aims for the Oscars after picking up several awards including one at this year's Sundance Film Festival.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. Drone photographers and videographers from around the world submitted more than 65,000 pieces of work in an annual online competition. VOA's Julie Tabo highlights some of the winning entries.
Bird's-eye views of land and seascapes can offer a rare glimpse into some of the remotest areas on Earth, get us close to wildlife, and provide different views of some of the world's most iconic sites. These striking images were just a few of the winning entries in a recent drone video and photo contest that was organized by DJI, a leading drone company, and SkyPixel, one of the world's most popular online platforms for aerial photographers and videographers. It drew more than 65,000 submissions from all corners of the world.
The competition was created to really push the boundaries of what drone videography and photography could capture.
Drones as an artistic medium have greatly evolved over the past few years.
It went from just niche drone enthusiasts to now we're seeing hobbyist photographers, professional filmmakers, and just people who are super into technology, utilizing the really innovative technology of drones and applying them in new ways.
One of those people is David Zelka, a professional videographer and drone pilot who is one of the winning contestants. He captured images of the Dolomite mountain range in Italy with an FPV, or first-person view drone, which can fly at higher speeds and with a wider range of movement than regular drones.
If you fly an FPV drone, you put the goggles on and you have manual control over everything. It can fly in a freestyle way, it can fly in every direction. The difficult part is you have only 3 minutes with one battery to capture the beautiful sunrise, sunset, the mountains. And then you have to land, change the battery, and fly again.
Taken from just the right angle, drones can also transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. An image of 2 women collecting water lilies in a pond in Vietnam creates the illusion of a floral pattern on the water. And a photo of active lava running down the side of a volcano in Iceland creates a distinctly lizard shape.
I think drones have revolutionized photography and videography, and we're going to see that more and more people from novice to professional are integrating drones as part of their regular creative process.
Thanks to drone technology, people the world over get to see images they would never likely see in their lifetimes. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
Nigeria's pidgin language movie, Mami, Wata, is aiming for the Oscars. The country has just submitted its nomination, a first of its kind, after picking up several awards, including one at this year's Sundance Film Festival. Mami, Wata, which was shot entirely in black and white, is an exploration and creative reimagination of the mythology of a titular mermaid deity of West African folklore.
No, Mami, Wata give Mama a physical.
It's not the first time Nigeria will be rubbing shoulders with the greats at the Oscars. In 2019, the Nigeria Official Selection Committee submitted Genevieve Naji's Lionheart, and in 2020, Desmond Obegele's The Milkmaid. Neither of them made it through to the official nomination for the Academy Awards, but the NOSC is not deterred.
It's a special thing to be in the conversation of world cinema alongside other countries. Even if we don't win, that's not the point. The point is, let us rally around the selection and let us be part of the conversation every single year.
Filmmakers and actors gathered at this year's Africa Movies Academy Awards in Lagos and shared their thoughts on African cinema.
I don't think we should wait for the Oscars to validate what we do. We just have to continue doing what we do. If we just do it for ourselves, it's fine enough. Let's not forget that we're 1.4 billion Africans in Africa. That's a lot of people. We don't need the validation of anybody else. You know what I mean? So it's great if they want to include us, but at the same time, it shouldn't be the goal.
In 2020, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announced it would allow films that are primarily in Pidgin English to be eligible for submission. The announcement will open doors for more African films to make it to the Academy Awards for consideration. Mami Wata, for one, promises to make it through that newly opened door.
I'm just hoping that this will do it for us, and especially in our own unique Pidgin English language. That's a language that unites us all as Nigerians. It's not Yoruba, it's not Igbo, it's not Hausa, it's not any of the other languages. Pidgin is peculiar to all of us, and so if it makes it, we all make it.
Since the creation of the Best Foreign Language Film category, only 3 African films have won the Oscars so far. The South African production Sosi, which won in 2006, was the only non-French language film that has made it from Africa. The Nigeria Official Selection Committee was formed in 2013.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
And we look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.